The Adidas Dropset Control Trainer. So 3 things to like with this shoe is number one, for the price point, the shoe is incredibly well-rounded. So if you're on a budget and you're looking for a shoe that costs well under $100, this shoe works really great for lifting, cross-training, and even some short runs. It's kind of more versatile than the Dropset 3, even though that model is a little bit more premium and dialed for lifting. So I think if you are a beginner or an intermediate and you're wanting to spend around $90, even less if you could find these on sale, they do a really good job across the board in the gym. The second thing to like with the shoe is the Repetitor foam. Now, the big thing to note with the Dropset Control versus the Dropset 2 and the Dropset 3 is that despite having a very similar silhouette, this model is going to be a little bit more versatile and more plush. So this Repetitor foam is going to be a little bit more responsive to the forefoot and back here in the heel. So if you're doing classes, if you're jumping a lot, if you're doing athletic style workouts, I actually find the shoe to feel a little bit better on the foot compared to the Dropset 3. The Dropset 3 has that denser heel, which is great for lifting, but it kind of falls short for versatility, especially if you're doing short runs or a lot of broad jumps, box jumps, etc. So the Repetitor foam, I think, is a big perk of this shoe. When you go into this model, just expect it to feel a little bit softer than the Dropset 2 and 3 if you are copying them and you're used to those shoes. The third thing I like with the shoe is if you like a bit of arch support with your training shoes, this can be a decent option to go with. We have a decent sidewall here to give you additional support, and with these lateral and medial TPU overlays, it helps give you additional ankle support as well. So if you're somebody that likes just a light support going through the foot, this can be a good option to explore in my opinion. It doesn't feel over jarring with that arch, but it does give you a nice layer, which is something that the Dropset does as well. But I think the Dropset can actually feel a little bit more jarring for some folks because that medial sidewall can be very aggressive. This model is a little bit more toned down. Overall though, I have been really impressed with the Dropset Control, but now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with this shoe. So 2 cons that I have with the Dropset Control is number one, and this isn't necessarily a con against this shoe, but it is definitely something that's gonna be a con for certain preferences, is that if you like a very flexible shoe, or you like a shoe that has a little bit less base to it, you'll wanna pass on this model. So this model has the torsion system going through the midfoot. That contributes to that arch support that I just talked about and that lateral and medial support. But what it also does is it takes away from the shoe's flexibility. So up here in the forefoot, you have a bit of flex, but back here through the midfoot and heel, it can feel a little bit limiting at times. So if you're really big on allowing your foot to go through all the ranges of motion and have a lot more play with your shoes, you'll definitely want to consider that with the Dropset Control, and you might want to go with something different. For example, the Rapid Move 2 will give you more flexibility and still give you a nice budget-friendly price and a well-rounded performance, so definitely consider that from Adidas if you are looking into Adidas training shoes. The second con that I have with this model is that the insole is not removable, and with its taper in the forefoot and its upper construction, I'm not convinced it's going to be the best shoe for higher insteps or for thicker feet. You can technically take the insole out, but again, it's held in with an adhesive, and anytime you take that out and an insole is held in with adhesive, I always tread lightly because usually it doesn't go back in super easy, so definitely keep that in mind. And then also, just as a 2.5 con, the tongue construction of this shoe can be pretty annoying. We have a mesh tongue here, and there is no gusset, so it can fold in at times. If you wear this shoe looser, for example, for casual wear, I noticed that the tongue moves a lot, so you'll want to keep that in mind to make sure you're really setting that tongue flush with your foot when putting them on every time. All in all though, I haven't really found any massive glaring red flags with this shoe. But now let's talk about the performance of this model. To break down the performance of the Dropset Control Trainer, I'll discuss how this shoe does for lifting, cross-training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, this shoe has done a good job. When people have asked me about this shoe on the channel already, I have languaged it as being a really good beginner and intermediate friendly training shoe, especially when you consider the price point. For example, you can train up to 400 pounds with this shoe with barbell lifts, and you should be stable enough to feel comfortable in this model, and you can also use them on heavier machines because we do have a full rubber outsole with this traction tread, so you get a nice level of grip across the board. So when it comes to straight up stability and grip for lifting context, this model does a really good job, and it has done a good job on every surface I have tested them on thus far. For cross training, the shoe has also done a good job, and I actually like them a little bit better than the Dropset Trainer 3 for cross training. The toe boxes are fairly comparable, so you do have a bit of room to display the toes if you have a narrow to slightly wider foot width, and the Repetitor foam is a little bit more forgiving than the dual density foam used in the Dropset 2 and 3. So when it comes to just pure impact and feel under the foot, I think this model does feel a little bit better. And then also with the upper construction and these TPU overlays on the lateral medial side and the torsion system through the midfoot, You get a good level of lockdown to the ankle and the midfoot. So if you're doing a lot of side to side work or taking a class here and there, or you like to just do a lot of jumping with your lifting on a regular basis, or turf work, for example, with sleds and whatnot, this shoe will do a pretty good job for your needs. The only concern that I have with this shoe for cross training is that it can run a little bit hot at times, so you'll want to consider that, or get some more ventilated socks if you also find that your feet typically run a little bit warm for your workouts. For short runs, the shoe does an okay job. Like if you're tacking on 400, 800 meters, or even 1200 meter bouts pre or post workout, the shoe will work, and it can work for interval runs programmed in your workout. Now, would I go use this shoe for 3 miles out on concrete? No, but if you're mostly doing intervals on treadmills or in classes, this model will be fine for short stuff. That is under a mile, maybe even 2 miles if we're really pushing it, if you don't mind a denser ride with your training shoe. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe does an okay job. You get a good level of traction with this outsole, so I do think you'll get a good grip. And something that I like about the shoe for daily wear over the Dropset 2 and 3, and I know there are some folks who will probably comment this below, but in the Dropset 2 and 3, you have that cutout here in the midfoot. That is great for ventilation and keeping the weight on the shoe down. The problem with that is for daily wear context, like if you're wearing the shoe out, for example, in New York City, and you're going to the gym before you go to work and it rained, your foot is going to get soaked if you're wearing that trainer. This model doesn't have that cutout. You have a full foam layer here, so it is going to protect the foot a little bit better. Now this foam could be problematic for breakdown for those contexts where it's wet or damp, etc. But from a pure foot protection standpoint, this model I think does a better job for daily wear. And with the Repetitor foam, it is a little bit softer, so it is a little bit more forgiving for all day use. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Adidas Dropset Control Trainer, I think most individuals should be safe going true to size in this shoe. If you currently wear Adidas training shoes or Adidas shoes, go with the same size that you go with in those shoes for the Adidas Dropset Control. If you have a D, E, or double E foot width, true to size should be the call as well. If you have a 3E or 4E foot width, you may want to go up a half size. For my folks out there with flat feet or very high insteps, you will want to consider that this model does have some arch and it doesn't have a removable insole, so it can be a little bit problematic with upper volume for some foot anatomies. But overall, I think true to size will be the right call in the Adidas Dropset Control for most lifters and athletes. All right, now who should buy the Adidas Dropset Control Trainer? Number one, I think if you're a beginner in the gym and you want a really well-rounded shoe for a budget-friendly price, this model can be an awesome option. Number two, if you like additional midfoot support and stability and a little bit more side-to-side support, this can also be a good option to explore with the torsion system and these TPU overlays. And then number three, if you like a slight arch support in your training shoes, this can also be a viable option to look into. Now, who should pass on this shoe? Number one, I think if you are a CrossFit athlete and you want something that's a little bit more budget friendly that will work for that type of context, you will likely want to pass on this shoe. You may want to go with one of the older Dropset models that's been marked down, or you might want to look into like the Tri-Base Rain models, the older models at that, or even some of the older Reebok Nano models, or some of the smaller brands like Rad and Strike Movement, and see if you can find a sale on some of their shoes, or even Tier, because they often have sales too. Another context where I think somebody should pass on the shoe is, again, flat feet and very high insteps. You will probably want to pass on this model. There will likely be better fitting shoes for you from Adidas and other brands, and it's really not worth trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, especially for a budget trainer. All right, so when it comes to models that feel similar to the Dropset Control Trainer, there are two shoes that come to mind. Number one, we have the Nike MC Trainer 3. It is very similar in the sense of having that low profile upper and being okay for everything with its medium density foam midsole. And then we also have the Noble Impact Trainer. That model feels similar in the sense of the upper security and its overall fit and feel on the foot when it comes to jumping and training, in that it is stable for some heavy lifting, but it also walks that fine line of being somewhat versatile for jumping and cross-training focused workouts. All right, now let's go over the heel to toe drop weight and insole of the Dropset Control Trainer. So for the heel to toe drop, Adidas has not disclosed it, but if I had to guess, it's likely around 6 millimeters. You can definitely feel the heel feeling higher than the forefoot, and based off of my other reviews, I would say that the shoe likely sits around 6 millimeters. When it comes to the weight of this shoe, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.50 ounces. And then once again, the insole in this shoe is not removable. So if you do take it out, there is a light adhesive. Keep that in mind when putting that insole back in or using your own insoles in this shoe. All right, now let's break down the construction of the Adidas Dropset Control. Up here on the forefoot, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up, and then you have a synthetic overlay that covers the toe box. I like that it stops short so it doesn't have any creasing issues. from that toe break. Looking at the lateral and medial upper of the shoe, you have a breathable mesh that goes into the midfoot and the heel. And then back here around the boot, you do have a padded mesh with less breathability. There is a decent level of support and security through the cup here, so it does have some structure. You also have an external heel tab to help pull this shoe on. Looking at the midfoot construction of this model, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 core eyelets that go up, and then you have a 7th and an 8th back here for lace locking or for having some adjustable lacing options with the shoe. Adidas has put this in all of their Adidas Dropset models, so that shouldn't surprise most of y'all if you are familiar with this line. Looking at the midsole of the shoe, you have the Repetitor foam that runs throughout the entirety of the shoe. You have a light bevel back here on the heel. You have some toe spring in this shoe, and then you also have a TPU overlay on the lateral and medial base of the heel in this model. Looking at the outsole, you have a traction rubber that goes throughout the entirety of the shoe. It does have ridges that move in different directions to help give you additional grip. And then you have a TPU torsion system through the midfoot to help give you additional support in this model. Once again, the shoe's insole is not removable, so you'll want to keep that in mind. But if you have any additional questions on the construction of this shoe, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that wraps up my review of the Adidas Dropset Control Trainer. Now, would I get this shoe again? Honestly, if I was on a budget, I would. This shoe has impressed me, and honestly, I expected it to perform notably less or just less strong as the Dropset 2 and 3, but it's held its own. It does have some different feels with the Repetitor foam when training, but for the most part, the shoe has delivered, and I really don't have any major faults with it. If you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.